Welcome into the Georgia Vote bonus streaming panel here on 11 Alive Plus and elsewhere on digital, anywhere you watch Georgia Vote content. Of course, Faith Jesse, my co-anchor, joining us as always, Howard Franklin, Democratic strategist, Mark Roundtree, Republican strategist, Chauncey Alcorn, journalist with Capital B. So grateful for you all for being here. The federal government shutdown is on. Chauncey, let's start with you. You're talking to your sources in the Georgia political world. What are they telling you about where the two parties stand? Where are they digging in, and where are they willing to be a little flexible?
Well, the biggest thing is neither side right now is in a mood to negotiate. The Republicans feel that they have a mandate because of the election, and the Democrats are looking at the polls, and their voters are telling them that they want them to fight. So it's anyone's guess right now who's ultimately going to get blamed for this. When you're talking about 111,000 folks in Georgia who may be impacted, have their be furloughed or have their paychecks impacted, a lot of federal government employees in the Peach State. People do not like when you mess with their money, so it's going to be interesting to see who will be ultimately blamed for this.
Let me just agree and double click on something that Chauncey said. 111,000 Georgians, 100%. But the spillover effect, the amplification of who those Georgians serve as federal employees, I think is a much larger blast radius. And I think also worth noting, and Chauncey, you said this, the Republicans have a mandate, but they also have something to lose. Democrats right now don't have a majority to protect. And in fact, a lot of the gerrymandering that we see, in a couple of the states out there, Texas, maybe Florida, elsewhere, may have already diminished their hopes of taking back one chamber or the other. So if you're looking at who's playing chicken and who's going to blink first, the Democrats have nothing to lose. Republicans have potentially, within 14 or so months, as Mark mentioned, the ability to lose control of one or both chambers of the House or of the Congress.
For those who are really attuned at paying attention to this particular issue and the shutdown, I would listen very closely to the words of Senator John Ossoff from Georgia, because he potentially is the most affected by this type of issue. He's running against two U.S. congressmen that are supporting the Republican version of the continuing resolution, while he is basically opposing it on the Senate side. And when he starts to buckle, if that happens, that's when there's going to be a change from the Democrats in D.C. He will be the first to go, I think.
And I think I'm glad you bring that up, because you have to talk about the politics of the issue. Obviously, this is impacting people's everyday lives, but here on the Georgia Vote, we're talking about the politics, the policies. We have some elections coming up. And to your point, I think that there are some Democrats that want to see Ossoff and the other Democrats stay strong and fight, which some people say they have not been doing since President Trump was elected. Going back to 2018, though, we saw something similar, much different time then. It was over border wall funding, and I believe President Trump eventually said it was 35 days of turmoil for a lot of people. And he finally said, okay, let's do this. Mark, could we see something like that happen again? Hopefully it doesn't go that long, but could we see that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I think that,
And would it hurt Republicans politically if they did that?
There's always the concern that Republicans have. Republicans are usually the first to cut and run on this kind of issue, because they read the polls that say who's to blame, and they believe the polls. And I have always contended that the polls are always something that is temporary and that you should be looking down the road. It doesn't really hurt Republicans in the long run. It can only hurt them in a temporary sense. I think that it could hurt Democrats much more in the long run this time. I think it could potentially hurt.
Mark may be right, but I would also say that Republicans also own the position of no in many of these shutdown scenarios. So it's less, oftentimes when these scenarios have come forward, Democrats are saying, here's how we get to a deal, and Republicans are like, we can't really have this conversation. I do think, though, we are in, to the point you're making, Mark, uncharted territory. And again, I think it's because Donald Trump owns the Republican Congress. It's less that you've got individual leaders standing up in the Senate and the House saying, here's what we're going to do for our constituents. He's been able to force his way upon leaders in his party in Congress for the last 9 or so months. And the question will remain, what will be the straw that breaks the camel's back?
The biggest problem the Democrats have had in Congress is they have no one that is in charge of a powerful megaphone, because Chuck Schumer is a really poor national speaker.
Or, I mean, Mark, is it that maybe there
This is a
are
good
a
issue for
lot
them.
of Democrats on the national stage who have some level of a megaphone, but just not one that has the biggest?
but
In other words,
not
there are
in
lots
leadership.
of voices
Not
speaking.
in leadership.
Chauncey, do you want to, so go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the other part to this is one of the main reasons Trump won the election was because of the economy. People perceived that their money went farther during Trump's first term than they was during the hyperinflation period that he had under Joe Biden. And it's, looking at this now, you have all these Doge cuts, you have the Trump tariffs that are taking effect, and, there's a lot of economic headwinds that people are concerned about heading into 2026. And now you're talking about a lot of people who may be out of work, either in the short term, maybe long term if this ends up being a big fight. I just don't know if that's going to shake out well for the White House.
Let's kind of zoom into Georgia and some of these other races. Mark, earlier you brought up the Senate race that we're looking at, but we also have a large and growing field of gubernatorial candidates here. We've seen, Faith and I'm sure you all have as well, seen a whole bunch of candidates, mostly on the Democratic side right now, but a lot of gubernatorial candidates hosting events, getting on the record about their criticism of the shutdown, pinning the blame on Republicans, at least from the Democrat side. Chauncey, what impact do you think this shutdown, if any, will have on the gubernatorial race here in Georgia?
Well, I think it's going to amplify the perspective that people want a fighter in the Democratic Party. I've been at a few of these town halls where they're talking about the big, beautiful bill. Nikema Williams had one on the Southwest side, and you see a lot of people who are basically concerned about their benefits being cut off and things of that nature. And I think that a lot of Democrats, frankly, are just not in the mood to, take the middle of the road route. They feel like they did that in 2020 when they elected Joe Biden, and the Republicans pretty much rebuffed everything that Biden tried to do with this whole effort of bipartisanship. And I think Democrats are just more in the mood to fight than they were 4 years ago.
If we could take a pause and kind of zoom in even closer into that gubernatorial race, because on the show we talked about Ruah Roman, who is now in the race as a Democrat. And I want to ask you all about this candidate and how she will fare against the group of candidates, including Jeff Duncan, who we also heard from on the show. My question is, on her background, is that going to be an advantage or a disadvantage? Just to give our viewers a little bit of information if you're not familiar. Ms. Roman, she was born in Jordan. She's Muslim American. She has been extremely vocal about the Palestinian issue. She is a granddaughter of Palestinian refugees. How does her background shape this election to her favor or to her disadvantage? Anybody can take that.
We wouldn't even be talking about her if she hadn't been elected to the legislature and wasn't Muslim. She is Muslim, and that's what makes her different. She has got a niche, and it's a pretty small niche in a Democratic primary, but she does have a niche. So I think she could probably raise some issues that are going to be addressed and be forced to address by the other candidates. It might be an interesting one for Duncan to come out against her specifically because she doesn't control a whole lot of vote, and he could come out and basically support Israel. He could take that approach, which fits with his older line positions back when he was a Republican. So her candidacy might be better for raising issues more than getting votes.
But her candidacy, it could also reflect a diversifying electorate.
Especially in Gwinnett County.
Yeah. Chauncey, Howard?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting. I've already seen some of the ads that have been launched against her and some of the rhetoric online attacking her based upon her religion. We're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of October the 7th next week, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stories about that in the news cycle. This is still Georgia, it's still the Bible Belt. It's not fair that, just because she happens to be Muslim, that people might, hold that against her. I think, though, you're talking about a lot of conservative Christians, even in the Democratic Party, so she's going to have to deal with that. The fact that she does have a lot of support on the issues, I think, will work in her favor, but there may be folks who want to challenge her based upon her background, unfortunately.
I would take a divergent view from both our panelists. I don't believe most Georgians, by the time we get to November 4th of 2026, will have heard her name. I think this is still very much a big state where issues aren't enough to rise to the top of the stage or the top of the ticket, and she's going to have to figure out or prove to Georgians that she can raise the requisite funds and communicate her issue. And I think in a media, and from a media standpoint, I think she's very interesting. But I think if you're talking about Georgians, kitchen table issues, government shutdown, I just don't think Middle Eastern politics even is like a close 5th or 10th in that conversation.
Well, on that note, we are out of time, guys. We will absolutely invite you all back so you can talk more. We truly appreciate you coming on, and we will see you back here next Sunday for another edition of the Georgia Vote.